Start introducing ourselves. I'm Natalia Bailey, like Margot said, CTO and founder of Axion Systems. Axion is a space propulsion company that I founded out of my PhD work. And so I've done bachelor's, master's, and PhD with a focus most of the time on space propulsion specifically. And around the time I was getting ready to graduate, there was a lot of interest in a new type of propulsion technology for smaller and smaller satellites because the industry was undergoing this big change. And so we had a lot of interest and decided to form the company. Hi, Parna. Just got started with an intro. And so we formed Axion in 2014, and now we're about 60 people. And we've done a combination of funding the business with venture capital and some government non-dilutive funding. And now we're really starting to pick up on the commercial contract and revenue side. And we have 5 launches coming up of our first product, and 2 of them later this month.
All right. Well, hello, ladies. Thank you so much. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All right. There it is. Technology is working. Well, thanks again, ladies, for joining us. Anna, so honored to be here with all of you. And thank you, everybody, for sharing a part of your day with us. I think we've started the intro, so I'm going to let that continue. Natalia, thank you so much. Lana, would you like to go next?
Absolutely. So my name is Lana Graf, CEO and founder for Nextera Robotics. This is the company out of MIT, focused on robotics for construction. The mission for the company was to eliminate the productivity gap, to increase safety, to be sure that construction industry is on track with the right environment sustainability impact, but in fact, Nextera is basically a core at this point for robotic and automation transformation. We carry a huge challenge to connect different type of technologies, robots, conveyor, any type of machinery that might be involved in construction, make it into single listing, and be efficient, that's safe. Now we're quite excited. We have an amazing partner working with us. It's Gilbane Construction. It's a New England very famous construction company, and together we soon will be announcing our first platform oriented for safety, again for environmental impact, any type of progress tracking. So happy to share more details and looking forward to participate in the discussion today.
Awesome. Thanks, Lana. Debbie?
I'm Debbie Theobald. I'm the founder of Vecna Healthcare, and we do information technology solutions and robotics, telepresence for healthcare. And, especially we've learned a lot of lessons over the last year with the responses to and the demands from COVID and how we can push ourselves forward into this next new normal. Specifically, we handle a lot of the administrative aspects of healthcare through everything from your appointment made all the way through the registration, financial clearance, and automated check-in, and then even towards the concierge remote presence through the visit. We're also expanding into home healthcare type of applications where we can create more peace of mind for patients, their families, informal caregivers, and care teams to be able to manage and coordinate all of the activities that go along with living with healthcare challenges. And that could be something as easy or I guess as mild as anxiety to, Alzheimer's and early onset dementia and things. And so helping people stay healthy, helping their families stay healthy, and staying in their homes longer. So we're really excited about the advances in technology, the innovations that are really making this possible. And, some of the silver lining of coming out of our recent situations that are pushing us to really enable and enact those solutions in a real world manner. So we're excited to be here too.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. So I am the Is that my echo? So I'm the founder of Brandon Buzz. You guys hearing an echo?
We're figuring out that if you have two tabs open, that might be an echo. So if you...
I don't have a tab. I just have one open. Anyway, I'll keep going and I'll figure it out once you guys start talking. Sorry about that. So I'm the founder of Brandon Buzz Marketing. We are a consulting firm based here in lovely Boston. We have the distinct privilege of working with a variety of global technology companies, entrepreneurs, and transformational leaders, and help them boost their market presence and company value. The best part of my job and also my passion is to spotlight amazing people doing amazing things, making a difference, impacting our society, especially women. And that's actually one of the reasons why I started my consulting firm. So today, as you guys just heard, we have three amazing women, tech entrepreneurs right here from my hometown, Boston. So we're going to be talking a little bit about, the emerging technologies, but more importantly, I think, technology and how and what it means to us. We just heard both Debbie, Lana, and Natalia talk a little bit about the impact. So that's where we're going to be focusing on. So it's, but before we get started, I just wanted to tell you why robots in space is really something that the topics are really close to my heart and, of course, my profession. So when my kids were young, I took both my kids, son and daughter, along with a whole bunch of kindergartners, or was that first graders, I can't even remember, to go see Sally Ride, the astronaut, who was here in Boston many years ago. And it was such a treat because I never really thought that I would ever get to meet an astronaut, let alone like shake her hands and hear her talk and listen to about, all the amazing stories. So that was, I think, my first touch point with space, like live in person. The second thing that happened was I started my career in the robotics world. So I was part of the amazing team at iRobot. And my son was 5 years old at that time. So I used to take him to our office so he could play with the robots, do demos. And essentially, one day over there, he told me, "Oh, Mom, I'm going to be a roboticist." So many years later, he is now doing his master's at Carnegie Mellon in robotics. And he is doing his internship at SpaceX as we speak. So now you see, it's very personal. This topic is extremely personal to me, and I'm so very honored to be speaking with all of you today. So let's get started. Why don't we start with the why? Why did you decide to launch your respective companies? And when you share that, perhaps tell us a little bit more about what got you to where you are today. Lana, would you like to start?
Always. So, again, so Nextera Robotics is what? It's basically a robotic company aimed for construction industry, just like completely. In general, I've been doing robotics for many years, more than 10 years, and always very lucky to be a few years ahead of a demand. At first, we were building a very fancy platforms, like with quite famous companies. Later, we were doing software that is meta language that is trying to connect all type of machinery. And then we realized that there is a different version already, not only for building blocks in robotics, they're looking for solutions, or they're looking for all type of help that might be good for them. A revelation when we were in biotech, biopharm industry, we are roboticists, right? We have no idea about domain expertise, and we started to partner, with, Purdue University, and we learned how it was great to have a partner with the domain expertise. time we started to see where else robotic might be crucial, what would be the new challenges, endeavors for us as a team, and where we could apply software, we realized that that would be construction, and of course we will be building that with our expert in the field, right, with the part in the field. Idea started exactly from environmental and sustainability impacts when that was a question out of MIT or whatever, like, can robots help with sustainability? Can robots help with climate? And we were quite embarrassed to get that question because we did never like really. And I remember at some point I was talking at home with my spouse, and that's the passion of my spouse, everything about environmental impact and sustainability, all the social justice stuff. And I said, like, well, actually robots are pretty much applicable here. And we started to see one of the most impactful industries in terms of environment. And that was aside of farm and all this agriculture, that was construction, quite in a negative zone. And we were like, well, something good with the software, and it was absolutely aligned with our business case. So we are started, and we can see the impact already. I'll tell a bit later, about the products that has tremendous impact on environment. But if to use a precise amount of lumberjack or any type of material used in construction, it's already a reduction of waste for like 30-40% sometimes. Same for the cleanness, the precision, the safety. So that is kind of our input, our kind of participation in literally making and shifting the kind of better. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
Awesome. Debbie?
Yeah, I think it's a somewhat of a similar story where, it's, you see a need, you fill a need, right? And how you're made aware of that need can come in so many different ways, and maybe different ways across your career. So we've been in healthcare for quite a few years, and how you get introduced or evolve within the needs of the industry can be very different of the things that push you here or there. So we originally started offering some of our solutions to really streamline the process for patients. I mean, it's just so arduous to deal with a healthcare system now, and everybody's a patient at some point, and so how could we improve this process, and how can we use technology and some of these evolving technologies to really make an impact? And I've been lucky enough that we started, before cloud computing, and really as tablets were coming up, and as each of these new technologies came through, it's been just made it so much easier to solve some of these problems and help people to get access to healthcare better. And now that we're moving into more acceptance of robotics, so starting off with robotic vacuum cleaners in their homes, and then moving on to lawnmowers, or then in industry or in other things, that it's just becoming much more of a granted thing that people are going to see autonomous vehicles around in all aspects of their lives. And this is a really exciting time so that we can start to open people's minds to the different use cases that are available now for what we do as the telepresence robots, and really make a lot of opportunities for people to be staff augmentation, and to be in different locations without having to commute from one place to another to see those patients, to have specialized type of caregivers in a location, whether that's psychiatric or pediatric or other things, in areas where or neurological, where they might not have access to that level of expertise if they didn't have that kind of telepresence component. So until we get teleportation, which if any of you are working on, I'm totally in, let me know. Telepresence is our next best bet.
Very cool. Well, there was a time when we thought, it was the Jetsons only could do what they're doing, and now we're talking telepresence. Like, we've definitely come a long way. Natalia?
Yeah. So I suppose, personally, why I started the company, I think if you end up with a career in space, maybe, I was a quirky kid. I think you kind of have to be in order to pursue this field all the way. But I was really into aliens. And I was also I had a knack for math, and I had a great guidance counselor that was like, you can combine those things in, aerospace engineering. And then as I mentioned, I eventually focused down into space propulsion. So what was happening, as Lana and Debbie mentioned, we also identified a problem. So an opportunity. Over the past, probably about 15 years now, in the space industry, folks have been looking at building smaller and smaller satellites, and this is for a variety of reasons. Big satellites are just really expensive. They're on the order of $1 to $2 billion. So that meant that since the inception of the industry, space was really the exclusive domain of wealthy nations and governments and defense programs, and was pretty much inaccessible to anybody else. So costs have been coming down. It's kind of a bit of a chicken and an egg, but as Moore's law, or just more and more technology has been developed, the cost to build a satellite has decreased significantly. The size of the computers and radios and other electronics that you need to put inside a spacecraft to make it functional and perform a mission, those have become smaller. And so smaller, cheaper spacecraft are now becoming, that's a bit of the status quo now. And so that means that everyone from, Amazon to hobbyists in their garage. And our first paying customer was actually a high school, an extracurricular program with high school students that built and launched a satellite with our ion engine on it. So just to, I hope that helps put it in perspective how much the industry has changed recently. But what wasn't changing was propulsion. So the only options were these, sedan-sized ion engines and hall thrusters that were great when your satellite was the size of a school bus and was $2 billion, but not if your satellite was the size of a shoebox and, cost $40K. And none of the existing players were trying to address this as far as we could tell. And we happened to be working on a technology that was really well suited to sort of this new paradigm of, first, most important was cost, and reliability and performance was sort of now at the bottom of the list of requirements. And we thought, hey, great, that's exactly what we're working on, a small, affordable way to do this. And then, the thought crossed our mind, should we just license this to one of the big aerospace prime contractors like a Lockheed or a Boeing and, be done with it? And we, I think a healthy dose of delusion or something, we're like, we're doing this so differently from how they've built space systems in the past. We're using silicon MEMS manufacturing techniques. We're using a totally new propellant. Everything about it was different. And so we figured, we had a shot at actually finishing the development and building systems and getting them out to customers faster than a more established player could do. So that's why we started Axion.
Awesome. Fascinating. So we're obviously talking about tech, but one question that comes up, I think, a lot, especially when we're talking about automation, and Lana, I'll maybe start with you here. In the construction industry, for example, there are data points that talk about, how automation would be displacing as much as 50% of the workforce. But at the same, again, I don't think that's a new stat, no matter which industry you are in. And the second relevant point, also, they talk about how not too many young people are joining, whether it's construction, manufacturing, you name it. So the first question that often comes is that, will automation and robots take over our jobs? And given the limitation or the limited number of people who might be there from a skills perspective, do you think that automation will stimulate the job market, or deal with the possible labor shortage issue that we might be facing down the road?
Awesome.
So the role of automation, essentially.
Of course, yeah. So automation enabler for a market development, for sure. Short answer to replacement of jobs and, displacing people, and I'll give a few examples. When we were choosing the right partners to be the main expert in construction, one of the key painful questions for them, the shortage of labor. And they persistently, constantly looking into the solutions that could, when they're looking for bigger projects or when they need to close the project at a particular time. So robots for them, it's enablers to be on time projects with buildings, with, like bridges, anything, dams. What's interesting, nobody is really thinking how evolving how many emerging markets are getting there, in terms of construction sites, it was probably around 4x in terms of how many of them all around the United States and around the globe. And if to look at the Google from a satellite perspective, 2010, like let's say North Carolina area, and these days it's like 30, maybe 40% more of a terrain is now developed in terms of construction, manufacturing facilities, whatever. And the question, why there is a shortage of labor, it's just because there are more and more developed, markets. People are coming everywhere, just like new developments, we're definitely developing. Second thing, in terms of robotics, it never will be ever a problem feel a competition to a robot. Maybe I'm talking here as an engineer because I know how much work is around any type of machinery, because you place one machine your belt and then you have constantly service, connectivity, all this RPA, unit economics, all those type of infrastructure that are automation, at the same time enabling people to produce more, to produce probably better, and etc. But here is the question: are we gonna use only to make it cheaper, faster, and doesn't matter, what would be the outcome towards the future, towards the planet? I'm quite happy that we have this discussion, because my goal as many of robotics professionals is to be sure that it increase quality, it improve our lives. It's actually a good way. So I hope that I answered somehow the question. So thanks.
No, that's good. Debbie, Natalia, do you have anything to add to that?
Labor shortage is a key indicator in the healthcare industry as well, especially aging and home healthcare needs. We have a lot of family caregivers that are doing it themselves, and it's a huge burden. And so anything that can help alleviate that, the anxiety and the burden and the the care that goes in, a lot of just billions of dollars of unpaid work that's happening in our homes right around us. If there's anything that we can do to help them, I think it's much appreciated, and nobody's going to be worrying about not having enough or visiting nurses not getting their jobs anymore, or healthcare workers or things like that. So I think anything that can help support them would be a benefit to the society.
I think that's a really interesting perspective, because we are always worried about technology taking over jobs, but the pandemic proved that is not always the case, because technology essentially enabled us to do so much, whether it's work or staying connected with people. Even you were talking about telepresence, but look at how we were talking to our doctors. Like, we were doing that via Zoom. So it's not like the doctors disappeared just because we could talk to them. So I wonder, Debbie, based on this, did you have to do a big pivot from a company perspective to support the kind of the whole digital era that we were living in?
The healthcare industry basically shut down. They were really overwhelmed. All the elective procedures were all canceled and things. And so there was very, very little kind of innovation except around necessity. Like, necessity was definitely the mother of innovation over the past year. But as people have come to assess where they are and what they could be doing and how this new normal is going to be, they certainly opened their minds to a lot more fluid solutions, whereas before they were like, we could never do that. I think it's much the same in the business world, where we're like, work from home? You can't work from home. And now we're like, actually, I guess you can work from home. And now it's going to be a job to convince people that they need to come back to the office and that you need to be there as a team, since we did it for a year away from each other. So the same thing with healthcare. There was lobbying by the American Telemedicine Association for many, many years for telemedicine visits. Finally, after 15 years, they got the CMS to pay for it and to acknowledge that it was actually a visit and could be counted and paid for under Medicare and Medicaid and also in the private payers. And luckily, that was all done prior and laying that groundwork so that when we have something like this, there's an infrastructure and a framework in place where people can start to rapidly adopt it. The things where that infrastructure still needs to be laid and we're behind the curve and something like this happens, that's a bad place to be. And so if we were to have this kind of pandemic, we didn't have the technology and we didn't have the framework, nobody would be doing telemedicine visits. And then what would you do? Go back to house calls or something like that? I'm not sure how we would have done that. Pandemics in the past have done it. And so as we're looking to the future and saying, what are the things, the foundations that we laid in place? Do we need these, pivotal events to transform us, or can we open our minds and see new things as to where we can go? And so it's nice that some of these have a business need, a business driver, and there's a demand for it immediately. There are people who can see what that opportunity is, and then they create that demand within the marketplace. And then there will be other things that follow along that just become kind of offshoots of this as we see the applicability in other aspects of our lives. So that's exciting when we see a business driver into space, for example, or, robots into construction, that you can say, okay, somebody has blazed the trail and now we have low cost and now we have the technology, we have this framework. And now as these pieces start to fall together, you just need like the right amount of precipitation for all of that to kind of come together and create a whole new economic system of delivery of some of these new technologies and new ideas. It's really exciting.
Yeah, no, exciting times. And speaking of trailblazing, let's talk a little bit about space. So I'm sure you guys have seen that Jeff Bezos and his brother, they're going to be taking off to space in there. I think that's going to be the Blue Origin's first suborbital flight. It also appears that there's a lot of rich men who are planning their trips. Which is really great. I'm waiting to see, a woman or two taking that leap as well. But obviously, the space ecosystem is definitely expanding right now. And some of the technologies and startups that we get to interact with are doing some fascinating things. So, for example, one of my clients' customer is called Orbit Fab. They're a San Francisco-based tech company. They're creating the first ever gas station in space. So it's happening, right? But Natalia, from your perspective, obviously there is a long way to go before we can all, have houses and offices and hospitals and Mars and space or what have you. What are you particularly excited about as you are part of this industry and everything that's happening around us today?
Yeah. So, I again went into the field because I like the exploration aspect and, a chance as a species to understand more about the universe and our origins and then equally, I think this space becoming more accessible to people is very inspiring. But back to the other bit, the more sci-fi aspect almost. A big piece of, in the next few centuries is, we hopefully become more spacefaring, is going to be, multiple spacecraft or at least, more than one, performing rendezvous type missions, approaching another spacecraft, doing a docking, maybe doing refueling, and and that's perfect that you just mentioned Orbit Fab and their gas station. So Right now, it still is pretty far-fetched to think of a satellite that's been launched going up to a orbiting, fuel depot and refueling itself and then leaving. Like that doesn't happen today. But it's such a critical piece. Those types of capabilities are so critical to, if we hope to have a more permanent presence in orbit. And just recently, I think the first one launched maybe end of 2019, but the second one just launched a couple months ago. Northrop Grumman built two spacecraft called MEV-1 and 2 that went up to two different defunct satellites. So satellites that had already finished their design lifetime. They were in geo orbit, so 40,000-ish kilometers above the surface of the Earth. They had performed their mission for about 15 years, and then they pushed themselves out into what we call graveyard orbit because space is limited up there. If you want to stay pointing at the same spot on the Earth, there are only a given number of slots for satellites. So when you finish your mission, you have to push yourself out even farther out into graveyard orbit. So these two missions involve these MEV craft going up into graveyard orbit, grabbing those satellites, pulling them back into orbit, and then staying latched onto them and providing them with maneuvering capability so that they could point their antenna and their payload back at Earth and continue performing their mission for another 5 years. So each of those will now have another 5 years beyond the 15 years that they already completed. And those are each year in revenue is in the hundreds of millions of dollars for one of these satellites. And so just having that capability, but really, so that's incredible, commercial revenue, blah, blah, blah. But as a stepping stone, I think, to some of the really exciting things we'll need to be able to do to become more spacefaring is just so exciting to me.
I know it. I don't think in my lifetime I'll be going to space, but I'm definitely watching it and seeing all the changes and the innovations that are coming. And it all started with that trip many years ago to see Sally, right?
Mm-hmm.
And and my last article in Forbes was just on that very topic. So switching gears a little bit, I feel that we are so very privileged that we have access to phenomenal technology. We have the internet connection. So, the whole access to cutting edge technologies, high bandwidth, those are all great. That allows us to do what we do without missing a beat. But then there are countries like Uganda or Kenya where they don't have such connectivity. Lana, I wonder if you could, so do you think there are any global projects that are underway to help some of these underprivileged countries stay more connected, do more, and have access to technologies?
So it's interesting how privileged, as you say, or like developed community and developed countries right now and thinking about sustainability. It's all about global collaboration these days. If whoever was participating in the conference for World Economic Forum, percent of topics, aside of environmental impact, of course, it was about partnerships. So we all, need to pull it out together, work and provide each other with knowledge, support, like labor, etc. Where I'm heading with that, aside of robotics, my kind of my passion, it's about neural networks, AI, machine learning. There are multiple projects going on with companies from San Francisco. For example, AI labeling, super important for self-driving cars, the session that we were just, listening to, anything that relates different type of AI products and etc. And those skills that are like really might be a luxury at this time world that might be too expensive to produce something like a services with that, they might be outsourced to, let's say, emerging markets. And this is amazing when it's not just like to say like, hey, who could label like high granularity things for us. It's about that transfer of knowledge, developing like supporting that parity, you know, like that balance in between female and male coders, developing those skills at the same time, not holding people within those networks, right? Like I literally let them fly, let them be developed and etc. I think it is amazing what's happening. In my practices, I do encounter a bunch of AI, machine learning, deep learning companies, and all of them having their or having second offices, third offices in countries like Uganda, Kenya, you know, Southeast Asia, India, of course, obviously. And the funny, it's not about getting the cheapest version for labeling for AI. It's about making an impact. And this turnaround, this pivot happened probably like a couple years ago, maybe a year. Particularly when you start to celebrate those, you know, like diversity, that global support. And I think we're talking about this, for example, you would get inspired, you know, like I will definitely think more about how to do even better, even more towards that. Do we literally use all our to help to spread that support, because it is important. Back into my, for example, background, I have mixed European. Remember how many mentors all around the globe were helping me, pushing me forward, challenging me, and then sharing like absolutely, you know, like without any idea that back or whatever different advices supporting me. So with that idea, having technology in hands, I quite absolutely fascinated with happening right now.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and I know there's a lot of students that are listening to us today. You just talked about having sponsors and mentors. How do you think a student can go about finding a mentor or sponsors? And I'm opening this to whoever wants to answer this, so that they have the opportunity to learn more. They have somebody who's telling them what to do. Obviously, the teachers play a big role, but where else can students go to get the inspiration, the motivation, and to learn more?
I probably will be just super quick to answer that, and I'll be silent, I promise. I'll kind of share a bit of my story. When I got a fascinator, I asked her, like, why did you, like, reply it? And she said, like, well, you wrote me, like, a huge email with why I should to you, so obviously you did like some kind of research, and then just kind of you probably were honest that you need help. It's not that you're this great or like you did this and that and you have questions, so I was obviously sure that I can help you answer that kind of. So she kind of said you were, so that's what I would definitely encourage, and obviously it is super important in terms of kind of be brave to ask, probably. But
I think just sort of along the same lines, I've had the best luck when I've had very, targeted questions and problems I needed help on, and I did research and found someone whose background and experiences and skills would match those. So, I would maybe recommend against like a just generally approaching someone to be a mentor and, not really giving thought to what that might mean in the very near term. But if you have very specific challenges you're facing, getting clear about what those are and why the person you're reaching out to might be a good fit, I've found that can work better. And then if I keep going back to the same person multiple times with more related questions and there's chemistry, then, I may formalize it and ask them to be an advisor or something like that.
Great point. Debbie?
I have many mentors from afar, and maybe kind of like girl crushes or something like that. And so I look up people's lives and study kind of what they do and what they're associated with and how they've done their career. It started when I was in college and we got our first female professor in the aeroastro department. Natalia's living my life. I veered away from the aeroastro many years ago. Someday I hope to get back there. But she came into the department, the faculty, and I just kind of like glued myself to her and learned everything I could about her path and what she did. And eventually I did get to work with her, and it was fantastic. So I've kind of continued that as I've gone through as well. So they don't, maybe they don't have a direct relationship with me, but I have definitely learned a lot from them. I think getting involved is also huge. And so in your industry, becoming involved in industry associations, having networking events, just getting to know people. And I think what Natalia said there about, having chemistry with people is huge. You can't force a mentorship, not something that's really authentic. And so that would be my
fantastic tips. Thank you so much. I know we are out of time. We could continue this conversation infinity and beyond for sure. Thank you all for joining. Please do follow these phenomenal ladies, watch their journey. I'm sure they'll, there's a lot that's coming from you guys. And if there's anything I can do to help any of you, just ping me on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for being here.